All right, so I'm going to do this video about GSP versus Khabib. And the reason I'm choosing this particular fight, which is an imaginary fight, is because breaking this down beyond the X's and O's has much larger implications on the overall conversations of the greatest of all time and all of that stuff around UFC. So I'm going to exclude Jon Jones from greatest of all time talks, unless everyone is just collectively going to exclude getting popped for performance enhancers. Because my problem with that conversation now, as I've thought this through more and more, is that if you remove Jon Jones, Daniel Cormier is the greatest fighter of all time. Not even arguable. Not even arguable. And Jon Jones has tested positive. That bothers me, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to put him in the GOAT conversation. So if you remove him, but you know that DC did lose to Jon Jones and you have a problem putting DC in there, then I think you're left with GSP. And I don't think that that's a very controversial conversation starter if you really think about it, right? So as it relates to the Khabib fight, I think that breaking this fight down will illustrate why GSP is the greatest of all time beyond just that he beat a bunch of guys in a row. Because normally, when you talk about the greatest of all time conversation, that comes down to how did they fare in their career? Oh, they won this fight, then this fight, then this fight, then this fight, then this fight, which can be a combination of circumstance and skills. But with GSP, I think it's something beyond that, which is this. What did GSP look like when he first came into the UFC? Early in his career, right? He was a Taekwondo guy, right? Or karate guy. Spinning back kicks, incredible stand-up. And he lost to Matt Hughes, and he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go become the best wrestler ever. I mean, I don't know about ever, but he went and started training with the Canadian Olympic wrestling team, and he became the best wrestler in the UFC. So he took his weakness and he made it his absolute biggest strength, which he used to beat everyone. And if you really think about that, it would be the only equivalent I could think of is Fabricio Verdum becoming an incredible striker, where he was like the best ground fighter there was in heavyweight, but he was pretty weak on his feet. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. I guess I'll just go learn how to strike, and then I'll knock out Mark Hunt and Alistair Overeem. You know what I mean? And you're like, what? So that's GSP to me, right? Like, he was a vicious stand-up striker. He's like, look, I'm going to go become the best wrestler in the UFC. And thus became the GOAT. Now, fighting against Khabib, different animal, okay? Khabib is the greatest wrestler to fight in the UFC. Here's the other thing. People assume that if a guy has fought at a higher weight class, that means when he fights at the lower weight class, that he's more likely to beat the guy at the lower weight class. I think it's the opposite. And I think that history has proven the opposite. That the smaller guy that's coming up a weight class, or when the guy comes down a weight class, the smaller guy of the two generally has the advantage. And I think that that's due to training and speed. The speed that they're used to facing is faster. You look at how fast these little 125-pound guys move, and then you compare that to how fast like a 205-pounders move. Like, if you watch Henry Cejudo versus Demetrius Johnson, and then you watch Anthony Lionheart versus Gustafsson, these guys look like they're moving in slow motion. But there is a threshold whereby size and strength, it's like, oh, you're quick, cool, bang, bang, didn't hurt me, crack you in half. Like, obviously there's a threshold where that starts. But if you're talking about a single weight class, I think it's been proven that speed and surgical precision will beat the little bit of size and strength. Also, guys are different fighters at different weight classes, right? They just are. When a guy weighs 185 pounds, he is a different person than when he weighs 170 pounds. I know this personally because my weight used to fluctuate a lot, and I was a different athlete at those different weights. And when Khabib fights GSP, if the idea is that GSP is going to have some kind of strength advantage because he fought at 170 and 185, and you've only seen Khabib fight at 155, I think that would be an assumption that is not accurate. Because they're going to meet at a specific weight, and at that weight, I don't think one of them is going to carry a significant amount of muscle more than the other. Maybe GSP a little bit, but is it going to be enough to supersede Khabib's technique, which thus far has nullified every single person he's faced for the most part? I mean, but this is the thing. If GSP can nullify Khabib's takedowns and wrestling, who wins that fight? Who wins that fight? Same reason why I think Gaethje will beat Khabib also. Here is the thing that I have not heard anyone compare and that I literally am on the fly thinking of right now. How invincible was Ronda Rousey until she fought Holly Holm? Pretty invincible, right? But she hadn't fought the right person who had the right combination of skills to nullify the way that she's always dominated people, right? Now, it was more obvious in her case because it was female, it was a very young female sport and there weren't a lot of contenders. In Khabib's case, his wrestling is so good that he's been able to overwhelm basically everyone. But who has he fought that is a combination of an incredible, powerful striker and an incredible wrestler that could keep the fight standing against basically everyone? There's only two guys I can think of that fit that description, and that's GSP and Justin Gaethje. And he hasn't fought either of those guys. And so if he beats those guys, you'll never hear a peep out of me about Khabib ever again. Because candidly, I will be more impressed by him beating Justin Gaethje than I would by him beating Tony Ferguson, because I think he matches up better against Tony Ferguson. I think that the Justin Gaethje matchup is a nightmare for Khabib. A nightmare. And GSP is just a worse version of that. Probably. I mean, listen, here's the other thing. I love Michael Bisping. I just started listening to Michael Bisping podcast. It's awesome. It's awesome. I love it. He's hilarious. He's the funniest guy out of all these. Me and him would be best friends. I mean, like, best friends. If we lived next door to each other, we would, like, inside the first 30 days of living next door to each other, we would be like, where have you been my entire life, guy? We would get along so well. We would laugh constantly. We'd clown on our wives. It would be the best thing ever. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to make that a thing. I think Bisping's going to be my boy at some point. Anyway, but are we going to pretend that GSP, after taking a multi-year hiatus and coming back and beating Michael Bisping, means that he would come back and beat Khabib? I mean, I don't even think Bisping would argue with that. Now, Bisping's a savage. I will actually take this moment to say, I watched Michael Bisping, My Destiny documentary. Vicious. Vicious. So good. I loved it. I watched the entire thing. It was over an hour, I think. Very long. Dude, I'm telling you, what you need to do, if you see these documentaries and they're about fighters that you think you don't really care about, watch them. Watch them every time. Every time I do that, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that guy's backstory. Darren Till, go watch Mixed Molly Whoppery, the Darren Till one, Win the War. Whoo! Beast. That is a beast documentary. It's so good. And the Michael Bisping one, I think, is done by UFC. It's My Destiny. Awesome. These guys are savages, dude. I talk about fighting. I've been in lots of fights, but like, these guys lived it. Like, and it's all they did their whole life. I just was, I'm not going to bring myself into this conversation. I would have thrived in that environment, though. Thrived in it. I was playing soccer. Anyway, but yeah, so GSP Khabib, I mean, that would be a great fight. I'm more excited about Gaethje fighting Khabib, and I'd be more excited about Khabib fighting Ferguson, and then I'd be more excited about Conor fighting Ferguson or Gaethje. But it's a super fight. GSP's been out of the game for a while, man. I'm not like Mr. like super hyped on GSP right now, but if it was coming up, I'd be pretty hyped for sure. Anyway, that's what I got. So let's go. Subscribe to the channel. Stop slacking off. Stop slacking.